Okay. So just a reminder for everybody to bone up on that and find out what it is that you need to do in that situation, because it seems to be becoming more of a reality in this part of the world. So we'll put all that kind of scary stuff behind us and look forward to hearing about the piping plover program in our area. So I guess, Bob, did you want to say a few words now about the walk, or do you want to wait till the end of the presentation? I don't know if Bob heard me or not. Okay.
Okay, how's that? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, I didn't know if you wanted to do that now or wait till the end.
Well, that's fine. So I guess Ken's put out the word, probably most people have heard. On Sunday, the 18th, I believe it is, we're going to meet at the Trotter Dyke parking lot on Town Line Road, Tiny Marsh. And the plan is to walk up the dike with the thought that being more open, there could be fewer mosquitoes. And if we get a nice breeze going, hopefully fewer deer flies. So that's my thinking. And we'll see what we can see out there. Get a look at some black terns maybe. And the last time we walked up Trotter Dyke, we got a black crowned night heron. So, well, we can always look for that and whatever else we can find. Hopefully we don't get any thunderstorms because there's really no shelter out there. But we'll play it by ear. And hopefully we'll see lots of you on Sunday at 10 a.m. All right?
Can I chime in, Bob? Because somebody posted some photos from today at Tiny Marsh, and they got some good photos of juvenile pied-billed grebes, which I find are a very attractive little bird. So look for those on the weekend.
They're adorable. They're little stripes. Yeah, they're worth seeing. Okay, thanks, Bob. We'll hope to have a good number out for that. Ken, I'm going to pass it over to you now then.
Okay, and introducing Andrea. Let's see if I can spotlight her. There she is.
Hi.
Andrea Gress. Welcome to the Midland-Penetanguishene Field Naturalists. I'm just going to read the little bio that Andrea provided here. Andrea Gress studied renewable resource management at the University of Saskatchewan. She was first introduced to shorebird conservation during an internship in South Africa, working with white-fronted plovers. After that, she spent a field season in Saskatchewan with piping plovers, which ultimately led her to Birds Canada, where she's been the Ontario Piping Plover Coordinator for 3 years. And with that, I'll turn it over to Andrea. And Andrea, you can share your screen.
Perfect. Thanks for having me. We'll get the screen share up. From the beginning. All right, everyone should be seeing that. Perfect. No head shakes. That's good. So piping plover conservation in Ontario. Obviously, there's some nest sites in your part of the province, so we'll chat about those a little bit. But we'll also just make sure you guys all know why plovers are awesome by the end of this presentation, in case you didn't already know that. We'll chat about the population status in the Great Lakes, in Canada, but also here in Ontario, and the challenges and what we're doing to try and help. So first things first, some of you probably have been out to see the plovers this year, so you might ace these couple of questions, but some of you maybe haven't. Is this one a piping plover? Just ask yourself, is it a piping plover? Killdeer. And how about this guy? This one's on a beach, sandy beach. Sandaling. What about this one though? In the water a little bit. It's got leg bands, which I often think is a dead giveaway for it being a special species. Yes, this is the piping plover. I just like to think, I bring up the killdeer and the sanderling because they're two of the most common mistook for piping plovers. The killdeer especially, they've got the neck bands that people spot from a distance, and then they're doing the broken wing because you're finding a killdeer nest somewhere. So we often get those reported. And if you see a killdeer nest and you're not sure and you think it might be a piping plover nest, report it. I love it. I don't mind at all if you're wanting to double check. But the piping plover's just got that single breast band. It's got orange legs on like that sanderling. It's got black legs, and it's got that little dash of orange on the bill, which is quite distinctive as well, and that forehead band. Now, can we tell the males apart from the females? I get asked this all the time on the beaches, so I like to address it. And yeah, we can, not necessarily all the time. Some females look more masculine, some males look more feminine, but these two that I've got here are great examples. So we like to zero in, we look at their faces. The female's bill will often fade from black to orange kind of more slowly, whereas the male's bill will be a sharp line from black to orange, very distinct. The female will often have a gap between the forehead band and her eye. And then her forehead band will often be a little bit less distinct as well versus the male. Now this photo, I gotta be honest, is a very attractive male. So he's got an excellent large forehead band and it goes all the way to his eye. So that's a really good clue that it's a male. But like, this is hard, right, guys? Because you need a good scope, you need a good photo, something like that to really zero in. We can also just go by behaviors, right? When do the birds come to Ontario? They first start arriving kind of April, mid-April. We've usually got plovers back in the province. By mid-May, they've met each other, they've established some territories, and we've got some eggs on the ground. Then they're going to incubate those for about a month. And by June, I like to say by Father's Day weekend, often, we've got chicks. The eggs are hatching. And then the chicks are going to take 3 to 4 weeks to learn to fly, and then a few more weeks to get strong and hardy, and then they're going to leave us and migrate. And those are a couple of chicks. You can see they don't have that plumage, right? They're just, they look a lot like the adults, but a little bit more bland when they're at that fledging stage. And we'll go into each of these with a bit more detail here. So one of the things they do when they first arrive, they've got a bunch of traits and quirky characteristics. They're very charismatic, strange birds. So we'll just touch on a few of them. One thing is called a parallel walk. So we'll just play this video for you here. And we've got 2 adults who are duking it out for a territory. And they're essentially drawing an invisible line down the beach. And they're going to butt each other out of the way and budge and shuffle and be like, this side of the beach is mine. And that side of the beach is yours. And don't you dare come over my side of the beach. And you can just see they're kind of tough looking and they're edgy. They're like a couple of kids who have to share a bedroom. And they're just drawing a fake line down the middle of the beach. Then once they've got a territory figured out, the males are going to make a lot of nest scrapes in the sand. One male might make, he might make 5 or 6. Sometimes they make a whole bunch. And then the female's going to come along and inspect the scrapes. She'll be like, this one's too close to the water. We can't be there. This one doesn't have any schools nearby. So like, no, but this one's just right. So this is a male making a scrape. And he's just kicking the sand out. And this is where the nest, where the eggs are going to get laid eventually, just in the sand. He is peeping the entire time. He's peep, 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 peep. And then he looks up. He looks for the lady. He's like, does she hear me? Does she see me? Come on over. Check out the scrape that I'm making. So he'll do this a whole bunch. And she'll come and inspect them. And if all goes well, we move on to the copulation, goose stepping, or tattoo march. And the male is doing the butt kicks. And I don't know, for whatever reason, that works for her. And this lady, this footage is from Sauble Beach, and she received this well and was pleased with this man, and they had a nest together. So happy ending. And that's kind of the lead up to the eggs. So then we're going to get a 4-egg clutch, ideally. They lay 1 egg every other day. So it takes about a week to get all 4 eggs. And then they start incubating them. And they'll line that nest scrape with little pebbles and shells and things just to maybe help with camouflage, might help with drainage a little bit. We're not 100% sure, but I think camouflage is a really good theory. And that's as simple as that. Then they hatch kind of 27 days later, roughly, and we've got little chicks on the beach. And they can run and they can feed themselves within hours of hatching, but they're super, super small, golf ball there for scale, right? And they're very fragile and frail, as you could imagine, right? But they do grow quickly. Here's our 14-day chick. You could see he's going through that scruffy, awkward teenager stage. And then our 28-day-old bird that, again, looks like an adult, just without the breeding plumage around the neck and on the forehead. At this stage, 28 days, this bird is flying well, and it would just be a matter of a couple more weeks before this individual migrated. Another really cute thing, I said they're charismatic, right? So when the chicks are under 10 days of age, they cannot regulate their body temperatures yet. So they need all of the cuddles. And this is a brood of 4 chicks getting cuddles from dad. But you could see that dad is like, whoa, guys, you are getting big. They're 9 days old there, right? So they're getting pretty big. It's a lot for dad to handle. But that's really delightful to be out on the beach to see. And unfortunately, if you didn't get to see it this year, you're not going to get to, because all of our chicks are past the cuddling stage. All right, so then they're gonna get big and strong, they're gonna fly, they're gonna migrate. The females actually will often leave the beach before the males do and before the fledglings do. So they did all the work, they laid all those eggs, they helped the male incubate, they took turns incubating, like a nice team. But then she's like, you know what? I've put my effort in. I'm going to Florida. See you later, bud. And she'll leave the beach and she'll leave dad and the fledglings. Often when the fledglings are kind of getting to their teenager stage, that's when she'll take off. So right now, most of the females across Ontario have departed. We had a couple of them spotted on Toronto Island the other day, just en route, off they go. They might explore local beaches before they leave the province, but they're on the way, and it'll be just a short matter of time before the men and the fledglings take off as well. Our piping plovers from Ontario and the Great Lakes, they go down to the Gulf Coast. So Florida is a really big hotspot. If you're not familiar with eBird, this map is all the purple spots are from people who have spotted piping plovers on their migration in October a couple of years ago. And you can see them just slowly making their way down through the states and getting pinned in various areas. So there's the Great Lakes plovers. Those are the ones that we have in Ontario, but we do have piping plovers in other parts of North America. There's the prairie population, 3,000 to 5,000 individuals. And that's like Saskatchewan is a really big hotspot, but Alberta gets them a little bit too. And then some of those northern central states. And then we've got the Atlantic population, roughly 4,000 individuals, pretty much all along the coast in the Atlantic provinces and then down to the Atlantic states as well. And then the Great Lakes birds here, they just nest on the Great Lakes, simple. And much smaller populations, so around 150 to 200 individuals. We do a piping plover census every 5 years, a big international effort where we will spend 2 weeks during the breeding season looking and counting every single piping plover we can find. So that's where we get these numbers from. So we've got pretty good ballparks. I like to say we're at around a 6,000 to 8,000 individual population throughout North America. Historically, looking at just the Great Lakes now, we think maybe 500 to 800 pairs, right? So quite a few more than where we're at now. And they were nesting on all of the Great Lakes. And then the 1980s hit, and obviously they'd been declining for a while at this point. Habitat loss was a really big factor, but also some poaching and whatnot back in the day too. By the 1980s, there were less than 20 pairs in all of the Great Lakes, and they were all in Michigan. And thank our lucky stars, the folks in Michigan realized that they might have the few remaining individuals left. So they started conservation efforts. They started protecting the nest sites. They started using predator exclosures, captive rearing, banding the birds to learn more about them. A lot of what we do today, it really started in the 80s in Michigan, and we've just learned from them and adapted, and we use what they kind of use to this day. So thanks to them, the population has been growing. This year, we are at 74 pairs. I say approximately because the season's not fully wrapped up yet. That data is yet to be fully verified, but around 74 pairs. Last year we had around 68 or 69. So we are increasing overall. So that's quite positive. And you can also see they're nesting on all of the Great Lakes currently. They haven't returned to Ontario's side of Lake Erie, and we're not really sure why. I feel like any year now we're going to get them at Long Point or maybe one of the other sandy beaches along Lake Erie, but we'll just wait and see. So 80s, they were gone. They were actually considered extirpated from Ontario in 1977. So we didn't have any breeding pairs in the province at that point, and we didn't have any for 30 years. I should say any in the Great Lakes. We have had breeding pairs in the Lake of the Woods area, but they're part of the prairie population. So I don't talk about them too much. Love them. Don't talk about them very much though. It's just Great Lakes focused. So they returned to the Great Lakes in Ontario in 2007, and they nested at Sauble Beach. And then the following year, they nested up at Wasaga Beach and Oliphant Beach and Sauble as well. And then they just kind of popped up in various locations over the years. So we've now at our 15th season in a row. They've been at Sauble Beach all of those years. They've been at Wasaga Beach ever since 2008. Tiny Township has been a relatively new nesting site that we're excited about. Darlington Provincial Park is a real consistent one as well. So this year, we've had 7 pairs across Ontario. And I put pairs in quotes because we've had a funky season. There is a lot more females in the population right now than there are males. So at Darlington Provincial Park, we had our male, his name's Blue, and his partner, Miss Howard, showed up. So Blue and Miss Howard showed up, perfect. They laid eggs, got their nest all ready and going, good. And then 2 more single female ladies showed up at Darlington Park, and Blue mated with both of them, and they both had nests, extra nests that they were dealing with all on their own. Blue wouldn't help them at all. Unfortunately, those nests didn't make it. It's real tough. They're a team effort kind of bird. And so just the single ladies working on their own, they didn't manage to hatch those nests. But those count as pairs, even though they're kind of a promiscuous, And then we also had a weird one out at Presqu'île Provincial Park where a female showed up one day, hadn't been there before, shows up, lays an egg. A couple days later, she leaves. So no idea who fathered that egg, no idea what went on there, but she also gets counted as a pair for statistical reasons. So I would say really we had 4 normal pairs in the province this year, and then those 3 single ladies doing whatever they're doing. And let's look more into your neck of the woods. So Wasaga Beach, tiny township. Wasaga, they're at Beach Area 1 typically. And then up in the tiny township, the last 2 years, we've had them at Woodland Beach. So this season at Wasaga Beach, they were above the boardwalk again. If you've been down there this year or in the last few years, you might notice that the park, when the nest is incubating, the park will fence off the boardwalk and you have to detour onto the main beach. And that's really helpful. It gives the birds that space to incubate without being flushed from their eggs constantly. Why they nest above the boardwalk? That's anybody's guess, but they like it. They're often very successful. They're often fledging chicks from that spot. So hey, whatever, it works. Just the one nest in Beach Area 1 this year. The pair was Fudge and Peppa. Fudge is a 2-year-old bird from Wasaga Beach. He nested at Wasaga last year as well. And then Peppa is 9 years old. So piping plover is kind of an average of 5 years lifespan. So Peppa's up there. And she hatched from Sauble Beach. She spent her first couple of seasons in Michigan, and then she's been nesting at Wasaga Beach since 2016. And she has fledged a lot of chicks in that time. She's a real good mother. And this year, of course, was no exception. They fledged all 3 chicks. So their nest did have 4 eggs, but only 3 hatched. that's not too uncommon with these birds to have an egg not hatch. But hey, 3 eggs hatched, 3 eggs fledged, pretty smooth year. Love it. And then looking over at the tiny township area, this is Woodland Beach. You can't really see where the nest is in that photo, but it was kind of close to the water, a little bit nerve-wracking, but it made it, no problems. Nice big area fenced off for them. Lovely habitat at Woodland Beach. I really like it there. We had Miss Sunshine. So she's also a pretty old bird, 7 years, hatched at Wasaga Beach. She's nested at Sauble Beach most years, so it's been interesting to see her abandon Sauble for Woodland Beach. Kind of cool. And then Flash, I love Flash. He's one of my favorite birds because he's struggled when he was first nesting and he's gotten better with time. He's 4 years old. He hatched from captive rearing in Michigan. So one of his parents was predated when he was just an egg. And when that nest was abandoned, the researchers collected those eggs, took them to captive rearing, and he's a result of that effort. So his first nest was in Wasaga Beach Provincial Park, and he nested in the rack line right along the shore. And obviously that didn't work, that flooded, right? So failure first year. Second year, he nested on a private property in the tiny township. And the property owners were so good and so supportive, but the habitat itself just was lacking some of that nice vegetation and driftwood and camouflage for those chicks. So when his nest hatched, the chicks did not survive very long. Poor Flash. So then he tries again the next year, last year, and he ends up at Woodland Beach, beautiful beach. He fledged 1 chick for the first time ever. He fledged a chick. And then this year, he fledged both of his chicks. So he's just getting better and better. He started off kind of dumb, and then just his improvement's been awesome. And so I kind of love him. So only 2 chicks at that nest, only 2 eggs to start out with. We suspect that they probably laid a nest somewhere else that we didn't find. We had a lot of pretty intense winds at the start of the season, but it could have also been lost to predation. So they probably started laying a nest, lost the eggs, and then either continued that nest or just re-nested with a smaller clutch at Woodland Beach. But hey, 2 chicks is pretty awesome from a pair, so we're really happy for them. And I should say with Woodland Beach, it's been quirky. This year, the nest was on the provincial park property, whereas last year the nest was really just a few meters over and it was on the municipal property. Either way, both sides have been super supportive and really, really helpful. But it's kind of funky that the protected habitat is shared by the provincial park and the municipality. And then the nest itself is kind of bounced between whose land it's on. So it's quirky. It's a unique situation, but it's worked out reasonably well. All right, so that's kind of this season in a nutshell in your region. Those fledglings are still around. So if you do want to go see them ASAP because they've got their wings and they're flying and they will probably migrate fairly soon. Let's chat a little bit about the threats that we're dealing with in Ontario. So human disturbance is just huge, right? Our birds nest on our biggest, most popular beaches with thousands of beachgoers every year, every weekend. And so that comes with dogs off leash. Naturally, dogs look like a predator. They look like a coyote or a fox or a raccoon. Even the friendliest dogs still look scary to a piping plover. So that can be a big disturbance. This photo is from Hanlon's Point Beach in Toronto. So you've got your dog off leash running towards the plover fledglings, but also there's trash on the beach, right? So just that kind of stuff it has an impact. And of course, just the recreation, right? There's so many people. How do these birds deal with it it's quite impressive, really. And we'll get into how we help them deal with it. Habitat loss is a big one as well. So of course, this is a photo up at Sauble Beach of the beach being raked. And I hate beach raking. I love a nice natural beach with driftwood and vegetation and like dunes and stuff. I love that. And so just beach raking, I'll never understand it, but it's not just Sable Beach, it's across the board in Ontario. Lots of beaches rake. And it's just a bad practice that does degrade our beaches and does result in sand erosion and habitat loss over time. And then also, of course, we build cottages along the beaches, we alter the shorelines, we do lots of stuff to the shorelines of the Great Lakes that have resulted in and continue to result in habitat loss for these birds. Predation is a really big one. This past week, actually, we have had a lot of predation at Sable Beach. Our nest up there hatched and 2 of the chicks were taken by gulls almost immediately. And then we lost the 3rd chick and final chick to a merlin yesterday. So it's been a tough go at Sable Beach. We can try to help things like this chick hut. You see that crow swooping in on. It's just a little triangular hut that a chick can hide under. We add lots of driftwood to add some camouflage, but there is just, nature does what it does sometimes, despite all of our best efforts. So crows and gulls are big ones for the eggs and the chicks. Merlins are bad for the adults in particular, but we've seen that they can take a chick too. And then mammalian predators as well, mink, raccoon, foxes, like really, there's a lot, these little tiny birds, these little chicks that are golf ball sized, there's a lot that they have to deal with. Weather events are another big one. So heat waves, imagine being a little chick, 3 days old, you can't regulate your body temperature yet, and it's like 35 degrees. Whew, that's hard. Let alone it's hailing or a big storm's blown in, right? That's tough when you're young. That could be dangerous for the eggs as well. And then this is a photo of Darlington Provincial Park, which has been pretty narrow over the last few years, and flooding is a real risk. We have lost nests there in the past due to just wave washes flooding them out. Fortunately, this year, the water's been going down a little bit and it's been less of a concern. But yeah, all kinds of weather events can absolutely impact the birds, regardless of what stage of nesting they're in. Okay, drink, have a little breather. You're feeling down because there's so many threats and challenges. But that's okay, we're doing lots to help them. So fencing, you'll see if you ever go to visit the nest sites, we try to set up the fencing 50 meters from the nest in all directions. Naturally, we hit barriers like a parking lot at Wasaga Beach or the shoreline at Sable Beach or something like that. But we try to give them that 50 meters. And that just gives them the safety to incubate, but it also gives them some space that they can explore when they're chicks on their own. And I love these closed area signs. You'll see them at Wasaga Beach. The park and Friends of Nancy Island have done a lot of really great outreach with local communities and with local school groups, and they've got these wonderful signs, and people love them. People react so much better to a sign made by a child than a sign designed by some biologist people, right? So it's cool. I love that. We use predator exclosures over the nests. So this is a photo of one that's being removed at the end of a season. This is a large exclosure. And it's a very sturdy structure, so you can't come in and rip it off or anything. It's really in there. And that gives those eggs protection from the gulls and the crows, and also like raccoons or foxes. Like it's a pretty sturdy structure, and we really do get a higher hatching success rate in Ontario because we're using these predator exclosures. And the birds are great. You set it up. The large ones take less than 20 minutes to install with a team of people. And the adults will be peeping at us, guys, get away from my eggs, what are you doing? And then we walk away once it's all installed, and they're back on the nest often within a minute or two. Just, they don't waste time, they're back on incubating. So it's really quite an effective tool to help with the predation risk. And then, of course, nest monitoring, the volunteers. That's what we've got Fiona here to chat about a little bit more today. But that's such a huge, valuable part of the program. We have had to cancel the volunteer program for the last couple of summers with the pandemic concerns, but I'm feeling like we're going to be able to welcome people back next year. I'm really, really excited for that. So volunteers help to collect all kinds of data, counting predator abundances, making sure the parents and the chicks are all accounted for every day. just helping to keep an eye out for anything that we might not be anticipating. There could be a new human disturbance at the beach that we didn't know that people were riding ATVs at this beach. Great, thanks for letting us know. Like all those kinds of things can really help us out a lot. And so we try to have nest monitors at the beach, at each nest as much as possible to just catch anything that we might have missed. It's a really cool part of the program. Volunteers also really help with the outreach. So if you've never seen a piping plover before, especially if you're not a birder or a naturalist type, you're just like someone from the GTA and you've got like your floaties and your umbrellas and all this stuff and you're lugging it onto the beach and someone says, okay, take a minute and have a look at that little golf ball sized chick right there. You would never have seen that without the help of the volunteer. And as soon as you see that, you're in love with them. Like people, like they can't help it. As soon as you see a little piping plover, adult or chick, you are now in love with these birds. And so we get so many new allies to the program just from those kinds of intimate conversations with beachgoers who have never heard of the birds before. So really valuable part of the program. We also do a lot of banding. We do a modest amount of research in Ontario, but research is constantly ongoing with these birds. There's so many published pieces out there. It's incredible. Banding wise, we are banding the chicks as part of the overall effort in the Great Lakes to band as many as possible. So about 95% of the population is banded. We can tell who they are as unique individuals. So we've learned a lot. One thing, for example, is when you can prove that a Great Lakes piping plover is overwintering at a specific beach in the States, that can often lead to that beach getting added protections because a Great Lakes plover is considered endangered there. So that can really help the population to just prove that it's a Great Lakes bird. So that's just one example of how banding can lead to direct conservation help. So it's really, well, it's fun too. We love our little birds. We love knowing them by name, and that helps with the outreach too, but it's huge for the research part of things. I always love touching on the captive rearing program in Michigan, just because I think it's really incredible what they do there. It's with the University of Michigan. Oh my God, I'm blanking a little bit. University of Michigan, yeah. And the Detroit Zoo work collaboratively on this. And so they've got lots of experts with these birds, and they will, if a nest is abandoned for some reason naturally in the wild, they will collect those eggs, bring them to the captive rearing center, hatch them, raise them. When they're fledglings, they get put in that little enclosure on the beach there, and that's where they get to kind of practice flying, learn what the wings are all about, learn what foraging on the shore is like. And then when they're around 37 days old, they are taken to a beach that has adult piping plovers at it, and that's where they're released. We don't know for sure, but we think that they learn a little bit from those adults before migrating. So that's quite a useful thing. And their success rates are pretty incredible. Last year, they released 39 fledglings from the captive rearing center. That was a record year. They had a lot of loss because of nest flooding, so they collected a lot of eggs, released 39 fledglings. And I think about 30% of them have been breeding this year in the Great Lakes, which is actually a pretty incredible success rate. That's close to what the wild fledgling success rate is for a 1-year return rate. So it's an incredible program. So just a fun one to chat about. And then last but not least, I touched on it with the volunteer program, but the education and outreach element is huge. Wasaga Beach has done a ton of really fantastic work. The park and Friends of Nancy Island, they've done these big Plover Palooza festivals. Unfortunately, we've had to cancel them, but I'm hoping that we can bring them back next year. Just fun and games for the whole family, face painting, scavenger hunts, all kind of themed around piping plovers and beach conservation. Stuff like that really brings people together. It's incredible. Outreach with schools, trying to reach the youth right now, the 18 to 25 age. We're trying to really tap into. Got an Instagram page this year to try and get those guys, and it's a lot of fun. And I think it's a really effective way of helping this population in Ontario because we share the busiest beaches with these birds, right? So letting as many people know about them is really beneficial for this particular species. And then finally, kind of wrapping up here, how you can help the birds when you're out there. Obey the beach rules and regulations. Even if you're not at a piping plover beach, those rules are in place for a reason. So things like the dogs either not on the beach or dogs on leash, respect the nesting areas. They're always well signed, fenced off, leave no trace. So leave no trace in the sense of don't collect driftwood either. Like leave it as it was, get your trash and food out of there. That kind of stuff can really attract more predators to the beach. So leave no trace, huge. And then get involved. Like I said, really hoping to welcome volunteers back next year. And I happen to know that some of you live kind of local. So I think perhaps this would be a great opportunity for you guys to get involved with the program. But then also just spread the word. Help people know about piping plovers, share the love, and that really helps us out. So here's my information. You can get in touch with me at ontarioplovers@birdscanada.org. Learn more on our website. Join us on all of the social media channels. We always post our various nest updates there. And that's also another way that you can reach me if you've got questions or you want to report a sighting. You can just get a hold of me any which way. So that's me. Thanks, guys.
Okay. I don't know if people can see me here. Do I have to? But before we thank Andrew for presentation, I'm going to bring Fiona in here. Let's see if I can find her. Oh, I saw her there a second ago.
I'm the one with the plover on my shirt.
Yeah, I have to find you to spotlight you here. Just give me a second. It's supposed to be alphabetical, but it doesn't seem to work out that way. Let's see, I can use a search bar. There we go. So here's Fiona. And Fiona has been one of the smiling faces at the Wasaga Beach for many, many years, for 16 years, Fiona. And maybe, Andrea, you know more about Fiona than I do. Why don't you introduce her?
Sure, I can do my best. Fiona's like the plover lady of Wasaga Beach. She's always out there. I think pretty much every time I go to the beach, I see her, and she's always got updates on what the birds are doing. She's often one of the first ones to spot them in the spring, get their bands. She really helps the provincial park staff with like knowing who's arrived and when, and kind of like the eyes and ears for the plovers.
And before we get you both started, I should have told you people at the beginning of the meeting, but you kind of know how this works by now. If you have a question, you can put it in the chat. You can type it out, make sure it says to everyone, and we'll get to those questions. But once we get going on questions, if you want to unmute yourself and ask a question in person, you can do that. If you're excessively polite, if you look under reactions, there's a little button where you can raise your hand and we can recognize you and give you the floor. But Fiona, what got you started with piping plovers?
Okay, so let me give you some background first of all. Hopefully my internet behaves itself, and looks like it's not going to be too stormy out here, so hopefully smooth sailing. Okay, so a little bit about me. I retired to Wasaga Beach and Wasaga, tomato. It's always been Wasaga to me. But I retired there in 2003. I am a very outdoors person. I love to ride my bike. I love to walk. And so I very specifically picked Wasaga Beach because it has trails in the forest and it has this 14 kilometers of gorgeous beach. So I did my usual thing for 5 years, walked the beach frequently, 2-3 times a day, depending on the weather. And then all of a sudden, in first of all, 2007, there was a sighting of a piping plover. And I tried to spot this thing, but it was all fenced off. It was down towards the mouth of the river. And I never did actually lay eyes on this bird, but no nest actually materialized as a result of that. And then in 2008, there were 2 nests right along the main strip of the boardwalk, which is right next to literally the main beach where all the fast food is and all the huge crowds come up every year. And so as I'm on my normal walks, I get really interested in these two nests. And very shortly after that, they had their 4 eggs. They started incubating. And I immediately got extremely interested and started becoming a volunteer. Now, one of the things about Wasaga Beach is we are incredibly lucky that our birds have generally been nesting on provincial park property. And so as a result, there's a great deal of support from provincial staff, provincial park staff. And so they very quickly, once they know there are nests, they will come in and they will put up perimeter fences as soon as there's an egg in a nest, and provide some staff support and all that sort of stuff. So at that point, they started to set up volunteer programs, and I got heavily involved with that. Now, our first year, a lot of people still remember 14 years ago, the big hailstorm. And so our first year was fraught with tragedy. We had a massive hailstorm. The mother took her little chicks down to the fence line, which unfortunately was in a dip, and the chicks were completely buried in hail. The other nest was in the process of hatching. They remained on the flat, and 3 eggs successfully hatched in that nest, but the little ones that were at the fence line got totally buried. So that could have been enough to put me off forever. It was quite heartbreaking. So that's how our program started in 2008. So we ended up at the end of the season with just 1 little chick surviving at the end of that out of 2 nests. However, each year it continued on. And as I learned more about them, I think I started being a little bit abnormal for a volunteer. I wasn't quite the usual, because I would be down on the beach at, early April, hailstorms, snow, sleet coming sideways, didn't matter. I was down there with my binoculars starting to look for the birds, because I was just loving these birds so much. And I was so excited to see that they would return again for yet another season. And so I think that's what Andrea was kind of referring to. So because the provincial park wasn't up and operating that early in the season, I'd be writing my lists, I'd be spotting the bands, I'd be writing down who had come back, I'd be watching them, I'd be watching the whole process of picking the mates and starting their scrapes. And quite frequently, I would be actually the person to spot the first egg in any nest. And so that's where I'm a little different, because that's not a part of the normal guardianship program at Wasaga Beach. But that is actually the part that I think I love the most about being a guardian, just spotting these birds, knowing they've come back, even watching something as interesting as a female comes back and the male hasn't quite arrived in time to mate with her, and that was his mate last year. Another mate swoops in, takes over, and then the very next day the male comes back and goes, wait a minute, that's my wife. And you watch the sort of antics of them deciding, okay, will I go back to my love of last year, or will I stick with the one that showed up first this year? So there's just so much fun watching the behaviors of these birds. They're so unique in how they behave. They have personalities, they really do. They become, you become very used to how they behave themselves. So that's me. Now, the role of a guardian at Wasaga Beach or Wasaga is quite challenging, because being right next to the busy, crowded beach, and I have to say, during COVID, we have never seen such crowds coming up so early, and not just on weekends, but like every day of the week, because a lot of people haven't been working. The beaches have been particularly crowded the last 2 years. And last year was a challenge because the beach was actually closed for a significant period of time. And so I couldn't do all that monitoring and spotting the birds that were coming back. But as soon as it was opened up, crowds just started coming like crazy. Now, under a normal year, we would be, as Andrea mentioned, education is a huge role. So we would be explaining what this was all about, why this prime real estate was all roped off for a couple of silly birds, and trying to convince people, we took over these beaches from them. They became almost extinct because we took away their habitat. We now owe it to them to give them their habitat back, to protect them in any way we can. And normally we'd have telescopes and binoculars and people could look. And I think, again, another favorite part of being a guardian for me is watching people come around. Okay, first of all, coming and saying, this is stupid. And then before you know it, they're coming back all excited. Do we still have them? Are they still okay? Have the eggs hatched? And just seeing that whole change in attitude. I mean, there's always the few, it doesn't matter what you do, you will never convince them. But just getting them excited and interested, and often recruiting volunteers as a result of that, saying, hey, come on, contact the Parks Department, you can volunteer as well. So, but there are challenges with being a guardian, probably everywhere, but particularly at Wasaga Beach, because even if we put signs that say shoreline closed, then we have posts right out into the water, blocking it off so that the chicks can get to the water. We'll still have people just duck under the rope and start walking along the shoreline. Or we'll have people that are ignoring the no dog sign, and we've got a dog right beside the area where the chicks are foraging. And, so again, this is a huge part of our role too, is to not just lose our cool, but to very calmly intervene and sort of explain, this is why the shoreline's closed. We just need you to go up and around the boardwalk, some of that stuff too. And normally, under normal years, we have educational material that we can hand out. We have tattoos for the children, all kinds of things that also get folks on board and excited about it quite early on. And I would say that's a huge way in which we have recruited a lot of volunteers over the years, just from coming down, learning about it, and then seeing these adorable little creatures and getting excited about it. So another role of ours is also to monitor what's happening, because it's important to know if we had 3 chicks yesterday and we only seem to have 2 today, have we lost one? And so then we know when we might have lost a chick, just that sort of general research information as well. And whether there had been a merlin in the area or something, or whether gulls had been the juvenile gulls can be a little bit aggressive. So were there new, big, large juvenile gulls in the area, all that sort of stuff. So a lot of it is just monitoring that sort of stuff, keeping a record of things, and knowing where the chicks are at. And then finally, being able to watch that first flight so that we can then say, yes, our chicks are fledged. We can now count them as a success story for yet another year. And so I think that's, and one last thing that I tend to, again, take upon myself is that because we have so many beachgoers, we also have children that seem to want to try to burrow right through to Australia. And so I have spent many evenings over the last 14 years at around 9:30 at night, rushing up and down with a shovel, filling in holes so that our chicks will not fall into them early the next morning. And it's something that, as a beachgoer, you don't think about that. You don't think about the risks to wildlife or even humans, quite frankly, breaking their leg in one of these holes. And so that's one other little thing I sort of tended to take on that was a little unusual for the role. And it had to be done so late because in the hot, beautiful weather, people will stay till 8:30, 9 o'clock at night till the sunset. So I think these were the main things I was going to tell you about what it is to be a guardian. It's great. I encourage anybody to give it a shot. Sometimes the flexibility is a big thing too about being a guardian. It's not like you have to say, I will promise to do every Tuesday from 8:30 to 11:30 a.m. You can pick and choose. You can change your shifts according to the need. You can look and see a gap in a schedule at 8 o'clock in the morning and say, okay, I'll do the 2:30 this afternoon. And so there is a ton of flexibility about being a guardian. And so there is no worry about, oh gosh, I can't possibly commit to something that I will do every single week for the 8-week period or whatever. So come on over, be a guardian, and come on quickly, because our little fledglings, they're still adorable and they're still running around. So come and see them before they're gone.
Thanks very much, Fiona. And I've been over to Wasaga and seen Fiona in action, and she doesn't just sit there in a lawn chair looking at the plovers. She's all around the beach. She's got a lot of energy. I can just imagine her filling in all those holes that the kids dug every night. But we've got a few questions in the chat, and why don't I read some of them out, and both Andrea and Fiona, you can sort of chime in on whatever you have to answer these questions. But first of all here, let's see. From Kate Harris, and I think Fiona talked a bit about this, but do the plovers have different mates every year?
Did you want to take it, Fiona?
Okay, sure. I think I mentioned a little while ago, it's quite fun to watch if they have their pick of the mate that was theirs last year and another one that showed up at around the same time. And we have noticed quite a number of times that they will pick the same mate that they had last year when they have a choice. But in general, because there are so few of these birds, it will often be, okay, this is the first one that arrived, this is the second one that arrived, they're paired up, there's a little bit of a gap before any other birds show up, and so they've kind of already committed to themselves. But they are not like ducks or geese, they do not mate for life. It's all a matter of timing, circumstances, and so on. So
they seem to be quite territorial as well. So they're really returning to the same territory. And if that mate from last year is there, then check. But if not, hey, someone new might happen.
I think the song is "Love the One You're With," wasn't it? You're too young for that one, Andrea. But
an interesting point though is that our Peppa that we have had now since 6 years or whatever it is, she has nested in the same spot for the last 4 or 5 years, but she has not always had the same mate. And we would notice that the mate was scraping in all the conventional places, but somehow or other, Peppa always won out and got her mate convinced that she wanted to go in that one spot behind the boardwalk.
I feel like that's a unique trait too. Like often the females don't seem to have quite that degree of pull, but she's got some clout.
And a question from Dorothy McCune. Can you tell what sex the chicks are at 28 days?
Nope. You need to wait until they return to breed, and then we can use some of those clues that I talked about at the beginning, or worst case scenario, you just watch the mating behaviors and figure it out that way.
So that might lead into some of the other questions, and there's a few questions here. You'll find with naturalists, there's always some that don't buy into the whole banding thing. They're concerned about imposing on the bird. So, and I'm wondering, if you don't know what sex they are, how does that affect the banding you do with the chicks? But other questions, why do the birds have so many leg bands? 4 or 6 seems a lot. Are they heavy for the birds? How are the birds captured for banding? How long does it take once you have the bird to do the process? So maybe just talk a little about the banding. And
Yeah, so the way the Great Lakes birds are banded as unique individuals. So if they're resighted anywhere along their migratory route or in the Great Lakes, we can tell that is a chick from Wasaga Beach, nest 1 from 2018. Like we can be that precise. And that actually gives us, having that level of precision And having about 95% of the birds banded gives us a lot of really useful information about how successful our conservation methods are. So for example, Wasaga Beach closes the shoreline after the nests hatch, and it gives the chicks better access to foraging, versus a site like Sauble Beach doesn't do that. Logistically, it'd be a lot harder for them to do it. But if you start looking at that, the real individual success rates, Wasaga Beach is more successful. More of their birds survive that winter migration and come back to breed in the Great Lakes than we get from Sauble Beach. And I think having that precise detail, maybe we haven't had a ton of push for change yet, but I think we'll be able to point in the future to sites like Wasaga and say, look at what they're doing. This is working really well. In fact, Darlington Provincial Park started using that same method recently. And the last 2 years in a row, they've fledged all 4 of their chicks. And they've started to have birds from their nests returning to breed, which they previously had never had before. So something like adapting a successful management tool, you can, I think I'm starting to ramble now, but we're learning a lot. And that's just one example of what we're learning by having those individuals banded to that level of precision.
I think one point worth mentioning is that all of the chicks from the same nest get the same color combination, but they will still have a unique silver identification number. And then they'll also have either a dot or a number stamped on one of their lower bands, so that if 2 chicks came back that had identical bands, we could still tell them apart just from that unique individualization of their bands. The other thing,
what's the process for capturing them?
Before that, Andrew, you might want to add what they do in the States now. They seem to be adding new combinations to adults.
So yeah, in the States, they'll recapture an adult that's breeding and they'll reband it. So how Fiona mentioned that the chicks from one brood have the same band combo, but with little minute details. Those details are very hard to see. And especially if you're on a beach where there are 20 or 30 piping plovers running around, very, very hard to tell the individuals apart. So in the States, they'll often reband birds once they're breeding and give them a fully unique band combo. So it's not at all linked to what their siblings have, and it will be 100% unique. So you don't need any of those fine details. You can see just from a glance, yep, that color scheme is that individual. So that makes it a lot easier to identify the individuals in really busy plover beaches. We have less of an issue with that in Ontario with our lower numbers. And then on to how we bound them. Is that the next question?
Yeah, the question was how they're captured, how long does the process take?
Yeah.
Why so many bands?
Yeah, so many bands that's linked to the precise being able to see them as real individuals with your binoculars and not in the hand. A lot of banding operations rely on recapture, so you need to recapture that bird to read that metal band. But with these, we can see with binoculars or photos. So that's why there are a lot. They aren't heavy for the birds. There are a number of studies that specifically focus on the Great Lakes plovers and if the bands are bothering them, and it's pretty, they're good. Like, we've got really brilliant brains on this. How do we capture them? We get a team of 5 to 7 people together, and we corral the chicks towards the shoreline, kind of make a little C shape around them. And then we're capturing them with a foam basket. Give me 1 second, I'll show you one.
Fiona, have you been part of the banding?
Generally not, because we don't want to stress the birds by having too many people around, but I have actually helped to round up adult birds on more than one occasion. And that's a different process that Andrea can always talk about.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, this is the foam basket that we'll use, and it's just really soft material. So we will corral them, and then when we're close, we can just plop the basket on top of them, reach underneath and grab the chicks. And we will do that. We'll try to get all 4 of them at the same time, or if there's only 2, we'll make sure to get all 2 of them, kind of thing. Get the whole family at once. And then the process of actually putting the bands on their legs takes 10 minutes once we've captured them. And then we release them back to their parents. So their parents are staying close the whole time anyways, but we release them back to their parents. They all run off. And then interestingly, there are some studies that suggest that their survival rate's actually higher for the first few days after they've been banded, because they're just a bit more diligent and aware that humans can in fact be scary. They get a little too used to us sometimes, it seems. You're muted, Ken.
Yeah, I've had the mute off and on. The grandkids are getting active. Are there any concerns with their winter habitat?
Yeah, there's always concerns with habitat. There are stretches that have a ton of human disturbance, like we have here. There are hurricane issues. The hurricane seasons, not only is that dangerous for the birds to be in the region, but that can really shift the winter habitat. So you could have this stretch of perfect plover habitat that's in a park and is protected could get battered by a hurricane and it's no longer good anymore. And now instead, this stretch of habitat up here is nicer because of the hurricane and it's not in a protected area. So there's those kinds of shifting habitat dynamics in the States. There's issues like the red tide, which is a bacteria that can make the birds ill. There's lots of concerns for sure, but there are lots of really good people in the States keeping an eye out for them too and pushing for habitat protection where it's needed.
I'm wondering, you showed us that map that shows such a dramatic loss of the plovers over that 30-year period in the Great Lakes area. Was that reflected in some of their winter range as well, or?
Well, the wintering sites, let me think about that. With the Great Lakes birds are going to the Gulf Coast. And then we've also got the piping plovers from the other populations, and they're kind of migrating to similar regions. So the birds from Saskatchewan, they're going to like Mexico, Texas, but the birds from the Atlantic are also going to the Gulf Coast with our piping plovers. So I wouldn't say that there's more birds in the wintering grounds because you've got all of the populations kind of heading to the same general area, especially the Atlantic and Great Lakes birds. I don't know if that really answered the question.
Yeah, I think it's more concentrated on the wintering grounds.
Yeah.
And there are piping plovers on the Pacific coast, are there not, from California?
No, there's snowy plovers, which are quite similar.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then one more question about banding. How do the parents react when their young are being banded?
They do everything that they normally do for a predator. So piping plovers will do the broken wing display where they try to lure you by pretending that they're injured. And then they have alarm calls that they peep at each other and at their chicks. But they stay pretty close. And so as soon as we're ready to release them, they take them under wing and scurry off.
And I'm not sure whether I probably know that, but when you mentioned the predator protection cage, there's a system for the birds to get in and out, but the predators can't.
Yeah, it's just that the fencing we use is the size of a piping plover, so they can just run in and out, but a bigger predator can't.
Okay.
If I could just give a little comment on that. Historically, at the beginning, the rule was you waited for 4 eggs before you put any kind of protection over the nest, just for fear of scaring the birds away and having them abandon their eggs. They would put up the perimeter fence as soon as there was 1 egg, but just not protect the nest itself. So in our early years, we noticed that there was definitely some predation of nests because they just were not protected. So then we moved to a system of as soon as there was 1 egg, we put a little smaller thing called we call it a mini over the first egg, and have really had only 1 time when a parent rejected that and it had to be removed again. But in general, the birds accept all this kind of stuff. They just go right back in. And then at the fourth egg, the larger predator exclosure can get put up. So we've been thrilled with this whole concept of protecting right from the very first egg.
Question here from Paul Rawlinson. Has an Atlantic plover ever showed up on the Great Lakes? Is there any mixing of those populations? I know we don't have a lot of plovers here anyways, but.
Every once in a while, there's an overlap, but it's pretty rare. Like maybe once every 5 years or less kind of thing is my understanding. It would be great if they overlapped a little bit more because our population's getting small enough that inbreeding is a concern. So some of that fresh blood would be awesome.
Well, this has been great. I think we're about to wrap it up. So if anybody has any burning questions, get them in the chat or speak up quickly. So I'll turn it over to Susan Hurst soon to wrap up the meeting. But maybe just before we go, I'm sure a lot of people are thinking, how exactly do we go about going to Woodland Beach or Wasaga Beach to see the plovers? I know Woodland with tiny townships parking restrictions, that can be difficult. My wife and I actually went over there, and the nice thing is that the protected area is right beside the parking area at Woodland Beach. So one person can stay in the car, one person can step out, go view it, and that worked for us. At Wasaga, I know right now the provincial park has free day use Monday to Thursday, so you probably don't need a parks pass on that day, I would assume. But how is the parking over there?
Yeah, that is correct. And what I would recommend is go to parking area number 1, provincial parking area number 1, because it is exactly adjacent to the boardwalk where the plover enclosure is.
And you would pay, the parking machines are offered, you pay for parking there, correct?
No, you're correct. Monday through Thursday is free because that is a provincial parking lot, provincial parks parking lot. And so
there's no extra parking fee. It's just free on Monday to Thursday.
Yeah,
okay.
Just take a ticket from the machine. It's only for counting purposes so that the park can get some money back from the government, but you don't pay. Well,
that makes it easy. And like you say, get over there soon because when do you think they might leave?
Soon. How's it looking, Fiona? Have the men left yet?
We now can, I'm pretty certain that both females have gone. Oh, that's another interesting point. Our females have been extremely good over the years, staying almost to the very end of the chick rearing process. So they obviously love our Wasaga Beach. They just can't leave. But yeah, the males have been giving them a great deal of distance now. And so we don't necessarily even see the males some days now. And the chicks themselves, being very independent, are off in all directions too. So the chances of seeing all three together are also pretty slim right now.
And at Woodland Beach, what was the result there? One nesting pair? Did they fledge a couple of chicks or?
Two chicks fledged from there. And I know the Woodland Beach female was spotted on Toronto Island this week. So I think she's started her migration.
Yeah, we've noticed, we've seen some greater yellowlegs in the area, and that great southern migration is already underway.
It's crazy, happens so fast.
Yeah,
Just I had a question, Andrea and Fiona. If people want to become guardians, how do they go about doing that for next year?
Yeah, I think one route would be to sign up via the Birds Canada website. I will apologize that the sign up form is a little bit outdated, but if you sign up, I'll still get all of your details. And then when we get to the point where we are wanting those volunteers and when the provincial park staff is full time, then I'll be able to transfer your details to them. And it's really the provincial park leads the volunteer program. And I just help out wherever I can. But you can sign up through the Birds Canada website. So
would you suggest doing that this year or like sort of waiting until early next
whenever
year?
You want. Doesn't matter to me. You can sign up anytime in the winter even. And you know, you won't hear anything until it's getting closer to the time that we need you. But even if you don't know for sure that you want to volunteer, you can always opt out later. If you sign up now, you'll get the notice when the time comes, and you can say, you know what, no, my circumstances changed, I can't do it anymore. But that's fine.
Right. Okay. So you can do that anytime, then the sign up and then take it from there. Wonderful.
For sure.
And so it's roughly April that would start, depending on when the birds arrive. And
Kind of May timeframe. We often
May.
get the volunteers full swing when the nests are established.
okay. And then till about till they leave.
Till they leave. Yeah.
All right. Well, that was very inspiring. Certainly I think I put a smile on everybody's face just to think about the work that you guys are doing. Thank you to both of you. And of course to all the other volunteers and staff and everybody who are working hard to try and make sure this little bird stays around the Great Lakes and thrives, hopefully. So thank you again. And thanks everybody for joining the talk tonight. And I'm sure Ken will be letting us know if there's going to be next month. Ken, do you know if there's anything set up yet, or?
I think we're going to take August off. It's summer is kind of a time when people get into cottages and things like that, myself included. So I think we'll take August off, and we still don't know whether in September we will be Zooming or whether we'll be in person. I'm crossing my fingers that maybe we can actually meet in person in September, but if not, we'll definitely get a September meeting on the go by hook or by crook.
Sounds good. Sounds good. We will carry on together, learning and socializing. So thank you again, everybody, and have a good night.
Thanks
Take care.
for having me. Bye, guys.
You're welcome. Bye. Thank you.